Here's 10 things that you should know if you are starting to plan a destination wedding. As a 2026 destination bride myself, as well as a travel advisor specializing in destination weddings, I definitely know how stressful it can be to start the planning process. So here's some things that I wish I knew and that I think that you should know before you dive into everything. Number one is that it is not as easy as just picking the first gorgeous resort that you see. There's so many logistics that go into figuring out where you should go. The time of the year is super important. If you're looking to go during hurricane season, that's definitely something you want to be aware of just in case it's going to impact your trip at all. That could also change the destination that you're looking for and things like that. There's also a lot of different legal requirements wherever you're going to get married. So if you get married in Cancun, you might need to be there a certain amount of days before your actual wedding if you're doing a legal wedding. Whereas if you're getting married somewhere like Antigua, you can do it same day. So it's just really good to keep those legal requirements in mind. A lot of people will do symbolic ceremonies just to make it easier. And so that would mean you're basically getting married in the States at a courthouse or wherever, and then you're going to the destination to have your wedding. So your reception, a symbolic ceremony, and your big celebration in that destination, but getting legally married in the States. Another thing to keep in mind is accessibility for your guests. So that would be all kinds of different accessibility, but how are they going to get there? If it's super far from an airport, is that something you need to keep in mind? Does the destination itself have 3 different flights that you have to take to get there? Places like Mexico and the Dominican Republic and Jamaica are usually going to be the easiest from the most destinations to get there, but it definitely depends where you're flying from and where you're flying to. That's one part of the accessibility. The others is, do any of your guests have accessible needs? So are they going to need a resort that has wheelchair access or elevators? Because when you're going to places like the Caribbean and Mexico, they don't always have that. They don't have the same requirements as we have in the US. So definitely something to keep in mind if that's important to you, if you're trying to bring grandparents or literally whoever it might be that might need some more accessible features at the resort. There's also so many other factors that could go into it in general, and it's going to depend on every single couple. I've heard couples that say a requirement of theirs is that the resort has to have a swim-up bar, or they have to have Catholic ceremonies. There's so many different things that you might need that it can be really difficult to find. So make sure to start by making a list of every single thing that you're going to want and need. And if you forget things, it's okay. You'll get it eventually, but definitely start with a list of all of those things that you know are going to be required for you or for your guests. The second thing is that I highly recommend making a list of who you absolutely need to have at the wedding and get an idea of what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do. Some people are going to tell you maybe something like, I'll only take a direct flight, I'll only pay X amount of money. And that's really good to keep in mind if, for example, your mom won't come to the wedding. If it's over a certain price, you might want to make sure that you're looking under that price range to make sure to accommodate for those guests. If the part that's most important is that you love the resort and you don't care who else comes, that's great as well. But make sure to have that in mind so that you can make sure to accommodate for yourself or for other people, depending on what you want to do. Number 3 is that I do not recommend planning it all yourself. I highly recommend finding a travel agent or some kind of wedding planner. Kind of depends on where you want to go. If you're trying to do somewhere like an all-inclusive resort in the Caribbean or Mexico, you probably want to find a travel agent that specializes in destination weddings, and they're going to be the ones that will help you with a lot of it. And then all-inclusive resorts typically have some sort of resort coordinator that works at the resort that is going to help you with the day of and the decor and things like that. Whereas the travel agent is going to help you get in contact with the resort. They're going to help you probably look through the wedding packages. They're going to help you and your guests plan everything on the travel portion of things. That's a really important thing because you don't have have the same contacts that these professionals have. So you really want someone who's going to be able to help you get in contact with the wedding coordinators, help you get some additional perks and things like that, which is why I highly recommend reaching out to a travel advisor. I'm of course biased because I am a travel advisor, but even if you don't work with me, I highly recommend finding someone that's going to be in your corner to help you every step of the way, because doing it yourself is just not necessary. A lot of travel advisors also only charge pretty low fees, or some are even complimentary. I highly recommend finding someone who specializes in destination weddings specifically, because they're going to know the most about exactly what you're doing. Because of course it's very different than just planning any regular trip that you could go on. There's so many additional pieces that go into it. You need someone who really knows how to do things like group contracts and get you the best amenities and concessions and things like that for your wedding. Number 4 is that not all resorts are created equally. There are some really amazing resorts. There's a ton of really amazing resorts. There's also some that are maybe too amazing for a destination wedding because they're just incredibly expensive. And if you want to do that for an elopement, or if you have people that are going to want to ball out, that's perfect. But in most cases, for most people, you're going to want to pick a mid-level resort. And what I mean by that is not too expensive and not too cheap. And your travel advisor can probably help you figure out what that means. But when you pick somewhere that is a little bit on the cheaper side, you might have some issues with guests complaining. And that's the last thing you want to hear. You really want people to have a nice time during their stay. And then if you pick something too expensive, people are going to drop like flies as soon as your resort gets too pricey. So you kind of have to find that mid-level where it's affordable for people, but you're not going somewhere where the experience is not going to be up to par for what you would want to have for a wedding. Number 5, and I think this is pretty important, is you need to make sure that if you're planning to do a destination wedding, which I recommend, I found the process pretty stress-free for the most part for my wedding, but you really need to make sure that you are okay if certain people cannot come. Inevitably, there's going to be people that can't attend your destination wedding, no matter who you are. People are going to have to take PTO. They're going to have to pay for their accommodations unless you are planning to pay for those things. And as a result, people may not be able to afford it. People might not have the time to take off, or they might just not want to go to your wedding. And all of those are valid excuses. And it's totally fine to be upset and sad and really wish that people could come. But losing friendships over and things like that is just not worth the time of day. So make sure that you are going to be okay if people aren't able to make it to your wedding. You can also get kind of a feeler of who might be able to come or might not be able to come. I've had people put out Google forms and things like that to kind of get a rough idea of numbers after they give pricing and things like that to make sure that it's going to work for their guests. I would say most people don't do that, but it's definitely an option, and it's your wedding, so you can choose to get those RSVPs or an idea of who's going however you want. Number 5 is you really probably want to do a deep dive of the destination that you're looking into. I've had a lot of people tell me, I really want a beautiful beach and I want to go to Cabo. Well, that's great. The beaches in Cabo are beautiful. However, you can't swim at most of the beaches in Cabo. It's rocky and rough waters, and so you are really going in the pool for most places in Cabo. And if you want a swimmable beach and you want to have water sports and things like that, you're not going to want to go there. You're going to want to go somewhere more like, St. Lucia or something like that to get that experience for your guests. Another factor you might want to know is what are the excursions in the area. If you want to do a catamaran cruise, that's going to be in most places, but make sure that they have that before you book a place that doesn't have a catamaran cruise and that was like the main thing you wanted to do. Places like St. Lucia, something to keep in mind is a lot of the resorts are not very close to the airport. So for example, I'm getting married at Sandals Regency La Toc, and it's a pretty long and rough drive from the airport. So a lot of my guests are opting to take the ferry My fiance and I are probably going to take the helicopter ride one way and then the ferry back because the roads are rough. So that's something to keep in mind as well. With sandals, our transportation is included, but none of us are going to end up using it because we don't want to take that car ride. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well, is how far is the drive going to be from the airport to the resort? What are the logistics of transportation and who's allowed to stay at the resort? If it's adults only, are you okay with that? If it's family friendly, are you okay with that? Some resorts only do a max of 3 adults per room. And on that point as well, a lot of times if you're 12 or up, you are considered an adult. 13 or up, you're considered an adult. So you count towards that max 3 adults per room. And that can become a little bit complicated sometimes. If there's a family with 2 adults and 2 teenagers, they might have to get 2 rooms. So that is another logistics piece to just keep in mind. Number 6 would be privacy. A lot of times, especially if you're doing an all-inclusive resort, which is what I specialize in, but the venues themselves may not be that private. So looking into a resort that has that privacy that you want, or that does 1 wedding a day, that might be a beneficial thing to you if that's something that's important for what you're looking to do. Or even picking a smaller resort where it's going to be mainly you and your guests. That's a good idea too. Some resorts even offer like private suites that you can get, and you rent out this huge suite for a couple of days, and that is where you're going to host your wedding. That could be a good thing to keep in mind as well if you want somewhere where not so many people are going to be able to see in. Really popular right now are the terraces, and for the most part, people can see into your wedding, but they'll be below you so they can see, but they can't really see what's going on fully. And for most people, that is a pretty good amount of privacy for the wedding day. But definitely something to keep in mind if that is a big factor for you, having nobody to be able to see. Not everywhere is going to be able to accommodate that. And you know, when you're paying for an all-inclusive wedding, they're usually going to be a bit more affordable than what you're going to find at like a villa or something like that that's completely private. So you are definitely kind of making up for that privacy in the low cost of the wedding. Number 7 is to be aware of things like outside vendor fees. These can definitely add up when you are booking a hairstylist and a photographer and all of these different vendors outside of what the resort offers. You definitely don't have to do this. I would say most people are going to do it for things like hair, makeup, and photography, videography. So just something to keep in mind. And what I mean by that is that some resorts, probably most resorts that are all inclusive, they are going to charge you a fee if you're using one of their non-preferred vendors. So if you're not booking the photography fee through the resort, they might charge you a fee, and sometimes it's $300, sometimes it's $1,500. It totally depends on who you're booking with. But I will say sometimes the photography and things like that through the resort can be pretty expensive. So sometimes it's the same price or even cheaper to book that photographer and get that outside vendor fee to have the photographer that you really want at your wedding. Number 8, and again, this one is pretty specifically to all-inclusive resorts, but something to keep in mind is that they're going to have a requirement of a minimum amount of people that have to stay at the resort. A lot of resorts, it's going to be 80% of your guests have to stay at the resort in order to host the wedding there. Like I said, the cost to host a wedding at an all-inclusive resort is usually fairly significantly smaller than what you're going to pay for like a private venue or somewhere in the States. So they're making up for that by having your guests stay at the resort. If guests are not staying there, that 20% of guests, they are going to have to pay to come to the resort because it's an all-inclusive, because they can eat and drink and use the facilities or whatever it might be. They're going to charge your guests $100 to $200 or so to come to the wedding day, or multiple days if they're doing the rehearsal dinner or something like that, since they're not staying at the resort. If your guests are staying at the resort, or the guests that are staying at the resort, they're not going to have to pay that fee to come. But if they decide that they want to stay at an Airbnb with some of their friends or something like that, they will have to pay to come on site for your wedding day. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I would say most wedding guests end up staying at the resort, but if you're going somewhere that's fairly unfeasible for your guests, that's too expensive, that is when you're going to find a lot of the guests might want to stay off property at a different resort or something like that. Number 9 is that in most cases, your planning process for the actual wedding portion itself is not going to start until 2 to 4 to 6 or somewhere around there months before your actual wedding date. These wedding coordinators, they work on a lot of weddings all the time. So they're not actually going to start having you pick your florals and your food and your decor and day of logistics until a couple of months before your actual wedding date. It can be a little bit stressful for people because of course you want to know what your day is going to look like, how things are going to go, but that's definitely something that you need to be aware of, that the planning process is not going to start until closer to your actual wedding date. For most resorts, you're going to be able to pick your venue and your times and things like that before you actually start the planning process, and then people will find their photographers and start working through some of those logistics, send out your save the dates, get people booked and going to the hotel far in advance. But things like your decor, your florals, your menu, that is going to be closer to your actual wedding date. And number 10 is that the stress and the process is so worth it. You're gonna have so much fun. It's literally a couple of days or a week or however long worth of a trip with your friends, and that is just so priceless. You get to hang out with your friends and your family for multiple days versus, an 8-hour event, and that is just so special. You're never going to get that time probably ever again with all of the people that you love. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. It is just, going to be such an amazing week with your people. So it can definitely be stressful trying to figure out where you're going to go and when you're going to go there and all these different things that I just talked about. But once you really get down to it, you're going to have the best time and it's going to be beautiful. And that's really all that matters. If you're planning your destination wedding and you found this helpful, please subscribe to my channel. It definitely helps me be able to make more videos like this. This is my first ever YouTube video, so I'm definitely learning, and hopefully I can keep providing more tips for destination weddings and travel and things like that. And if you're ready to start the process of planning your destination wedding and you want a little bit of help, like I said, I know it can be stressful. Please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Taylor. I'm a travel advisor specializing in all things destination weddings, and I would absolutely love to help you plan. I can't wait to hear from you.